Thought I'd get started really quickly and just talk about some of the developments that we've been seeing at Geotab, some that pertain to last mile and just some in general. So definitely, as we're always advancing and growing at the company, we're always looking at how we can enhance our products and make them more efficient and more beneficial to the users. The goal of Geotab is really to innovate and to create and keep growing as a company. So one of the things we're working on really shortly and in the near future is working on our next version of the IOX. From a functionality perspective, this isn't going to affect you, but for the reliability and the producing of these products, everything will be made more efficient. So we can be more rely more on the capability of this of the different IOXs. This will apply to all of the different ones and be very helpful for us moving forward. And realistically, we'll start seeing some less failures out there that may potentially exist. One that I'm a little bit more excited to talk about is the can clamp. As we talk about different markets, and a lot of the discussions we've had here is about local needs and local differences. The can clamp is a solution that we put together that actually allows for our device to be able to connect to more intrusive CAN connections in a vehicle, where potentially an OBD doesn't exist or a new port exists that is not catered for. This can clamp can be made to connect into the CAN lines very uninvasively and allow us to connect to these various situations. This could be helpful in off-road situations, a lot of trucks, or even in maybe some older vehicles where the ports weren't more standardized at that point in time. This is extremely helpful for the market here, where sometimes we do encounter these, especially if you're engaged in sort of off-road industries and the like. I really wish I could have had a picture for you, so I apologize that we didn't have one available, but soon enough we'll have it up on the website and you can check it out. But the concept here is to be able to make the connection of the device, of the Geotab device, more capable in these different environments as both the industry changes and the vehicles change on us. And then some other developments that we're coming up with, things to make the device smarter and more connected. Things like the car share capability. This will allow us to actually theoretically and realistically connect to the vehicle to control its door lock, unlock state. You know, now we can connect to it a little bit more remotely and have more control over this vehicle. And I mentioned that it's for car share purposes, but not limited to, and can be used in many situations where access of control of that vehicle could be very beneficial to everybody. The concept here is that you can use the Geotab security methods to be able to connect to these vehicles to control whether or not the door is open or not, and have it set to certain times for allowance by certain phones with certain keys, and make sure that security is the utmost of importance when we're allowing this control within the vehicle. I wouldn't be anywhere here if I couldn't mention the tachograph. There was a lot of emotion about the tachograph a little bit earlier, and in fairness, right? And I think in the market here, we've kind of gone beyond the tachograph capability and mindset. But today, right now, in Europe, it's still regularly used, and we have actually developed an IOX tachograph device, a harness, to connect into the tachograph to pull in a lot of this type of information through our system, so that we don't need to worry about the tachograph information in the way to communicate to the systems in the back end as it normally is physically done today. I mention it though because there are still some environments or some vehicles that might rely on this, and if you wanted to pull that information through from the device, it will be made possible in some instances. And then the airplane mode is something that I'm pretty excited about. Being in more of a mining industry, we hear a lot about the needs for being able to cut out the cell connectivity of a device because there's potential signal explosives within the area of a mine site. So we are actually enabling, and we're in the beta phase right now for this with successful testing, to be able to turn on and off that GSM cell phone connection, to be able to actually turn off that signal completely, so when it's in dangerous situation or environments, we can still properly use the equipment in that area. Still has GPS enabled on it because that's only a receiving function but doesn't send out anything. And once it connects again, you'll get the dump of that information. This will theoretically be controlled two ways. One where you based off of a location, then when you leave a certain location, or even through a flip of a switch so that the driver inside can control when that functionality is on or off. This has been a great development and something that we've had to use in many different mine sites just because the requirement for that lack of connectivity and signals have been applied or not applied. And then we talk a little about privacy mode. We start talking a little bit in terms of where we're using the vehicles. We're in environments where potentially the vehicles are being used for personal use by a driver. We talk a lot about security, but we haven't dived too much into the concept of privacy. And privacy is important for some people. Well, hopefully a lot of people here. And we did touch on it a little bit with some of the, the hack video and everything that had been talked about. And we want to be able to help the drivers and the fleets, use this type of technology to be able to block out private use of the vehicle for when a driver is using it for personal use, et cetera. So some of you may have already heard of this product, and it has been in use, but we're making some functionality changes to it right now, specifically in changing it to personal mode, right? It's for personal use when you're driving it in that case. Certain naming conventions will change, but instead of saying private, not private, it'll be personal versus business. And make sure that we actually have a proper explanation of what these features mean and what they do. The trips that are set into personal or private mode are not going to be aggregated in my Geotab, which had happened historically, because this is a true blockout of that data of information of travel time when the vehicle was in that system. Why are we doing this? Really, it's to be much more transparent for the users of the system and to make the drivers feel more comfortable if they're in these environments. The concept around building this out fully is to give the ability to the fleet managers to determine and dictate what does personal mean, what does private mean, and they can set that up in their environment with their drivers. The data will be fully filtered on the My Geotab side, and I just need to dictate this, that the data is still technically being read on the device, and it's still being stored in our servers. It's just not being exposed in the My Geotab end. If there's ever any interest in terms of having a complete non-GPS product, that would be something that you would want to reach out to the Geotab office to talk about that type of functionality. I'm just going to skip through this next slide, so sorry if you see me jump twice because we're a little bit short on time today, so I'm trying to go through a little bit quick to talk a little bit more about the last mile, the supply chain aspect of the system. So what is really last mile? And there's a definition of that final trip that you make with goods or services in order to accomplish your transportation needs. But the solution to it is not so clear cut. We know the problem, but we don't know the solution. The solution changes based off of what your fleet is doing, how you're using it. There's a lot of factors involved there. And we look at using the GPS product as a big solve for this. Now, in some industries and some companies, the GPS information and the engine data is more than enough to be able to accomplish these needs. In some cases, it's actually just a tool in the tool belt. How do we get to this end? What are the tools that we have available to us to get there? We have many large companies that use our product today, and you probably know a lot of these, but for example, a PepsiCo will manage their last mile delivery much different than, say, a UPS for logistics purposes. And I'll dive a little bit into some of these approaches that we take and how you can use these yourself. So the real concept here is don't forget your tools. Don't forget what you have with you. The truth of the matter is, when it comes to the Geotab environment, most of what you already have access to are the tools that can be used to help you accomplish this last mile need and to solve for the issues that you're running into. You have the capability of making zones, running routes, looking at your fuel usage and information, making rules engines for criteria for knowing when something had occurred or not, using the engine data, and then furthermore using that SDK when it comes to more of an integrated environment to be able to accomplish these. So on that SDK point, use it. It's there to be able to pull the data and integrate with other systems and to be able to make them merge together and work in harmony with each other. If you have another program that's reliable for, say, an ERP type program or even route optimization, the data can be extracted and pulled and then optimized in these other environments and work in tandem with each other. We talk a lot about open platform, and I know there's going to be a presentation later to talk about it, so I'll let them take over the importance of that open platform approach. But this is where we talk about open platform. You don't need to rely purely on the environment that's been provided to you to make these work. You can use them with all these different partners, much like we see in the back of the room, where we see that there's a lot of different marketplace partners and integrations that are done with our system. So use your tools effectively. In the system, you can make efficient routes, right? For last mile, it's probably one of the most important things, and as much as I say there's different solutions for all these different groups, this is probably the number one that has to be the same between everybody. Be efficient with your final routing and your routing. Sorry for my pronunciation, I get mixed up between US and Canada and here. Routing work for everybody here? Okay, that's what I prefer. And you have to be efficient with that. So in the system, you can use the simple approach that we take for optimization of locations. Say if this vehicle has to go to these locations, can I optimize that? And then it sets up a proper optimization. But as mentioned before, if you're using a route optimization system already, you can utilize the system to pull all of the information into that environment, have it churn through these route optimizations, and then push it back into our system to have these routes set up. So, I did it again. Have these routes set up so that you can properly appropriate the trips to the vehicles and then actually see the results of them in the UI. Things like knowing when you arrived or when you left a location. How much time am I spending in each customer location and information like that. We have found that with some of the fleets like with Pepsi, some of the issues actually lied with the fact that the zone locations were actually sort of a big block around a building, and it didn't show where the actual delivery location was. So they were driving into the front of a building when really they had to go around to the back for the drop-off location. And the time lost in that environment can actually be pretty critical and pretty catastrophic. So in an entire day, you might lose 10 to 15 minutes just trying to figure out where that entrance is to be able to deliver. So using these types of tools, you can both see, am I being efficient with my timing at a location, or am I even creating these zones and these locations appropriately? Make sure they're on the right location. And as we talk about big data, tools and effectiveness can be used with that to be able to help determine where these zones should be. So we can run projects. Mike Branch was talking about smart automation. You can look at where the normal location is for a vehicle over a large period of time and have it help you automatically set up zones into these locations, say that's where they should really be going, and then really help the system automate and set it up itself. And then as we talk about this, once you have these routes and these zones and everything in the system, make sure you're looking for the deviation of these. Where are we going off track? Where are we looking at where we're actually supposed to be versus where we were? And being able to really look at the plan versus actual results of the system so that I can do a better job of managing my fleet and make sure that we can work on our system and optimize. But then it's not all just about GPS, right? We have to go a little bit further than that too. And we have to use the tools that are available to us elsewhere. The name of the game really is cost savings as well as efficiency on the route there. So information like, how much fuel am I normally using in these routes? Am I being effective with that? How much fuel do I have right now so that when I send out a vehicle, will it have enough fuel to be able to do its trip? These types of things can really affect us. It was a little bit mentioned before that in some instances, the cost of an issue like this might not be a lot in terms of, say, running out of fuel and then having somebody fill it up. But the cost on productivity is pretty high. And any shock to the productivity of your fleet is going to have a large cost associated to it. So make sure you're prepared and you're planning ahead of time for these situations. Make sure you're monitoring your idle times, right? Make sure when you're parking at your location and you're actually doing your final delivery or whatever it is that you're focused on, that you're not over-idling and you're not adding unnecessary expenses to what your fleet is doing. Right? When we first worked with the likes of Pepsi, the first goal was to eliminate idle times. And by eliminating idle times, they were already able to make and save a lot of money over that. But then you could expand on that. We talked about these other capabilities, but sometimes it's just a matter of starting simple. We had somebody come up and say, solve for one problem, but be prepared to solve for more. And I fully agree with that. You can't solve everything at the start, but you can work your way up to the solve. And you have to know that the product and the solution that you're using is capable of getting you there in the long run. You need to future-proof yourself and make sure it's possible. And then look at your engine as well, right? We don't want to be driving an engine that's in a bad place. We don't want to be putting undue stress onto it. Not only is there information to be able to say when the engine light turned on and can I look at it, but there's systems in place to be able to look at that with other systems. We actually have some, I don't think they're in the room right now, but we have some partners from Cummins here, for example, that if you're driving a truck and you have a Cummins engine, you can actually use this system to send the data to them, and they will tell you how severe an engine alert is and tell you what you need to do to solve it. Is it a problem where you have to take it off the road right away? Can you wait until you're finished your delivery, et cetera? These types of pieces of information are imperative to making sure that you can reduce a lot of issues on the road. And it's been very enlightening for me today, seeing that there's some situations out in the fleets where vehicles are not kept up to par. They're not treated very well. So rely on the digital information you have as well. I know a lot is mechanical, but rely on the digital information that you have coming in there to make sure that your fleet is running effectively and efficiently. And really, finally, is take advantage of that marketplace. There's a lot of solutions out there to help towards route optimization and similar. These are just some examples, but we have a lot of interesting examples in the back to help make your fleet run more efficiently, get some more information, and to be able to sync up for your supply chain needs. So ultimately, as I said, I would try to keep this a little bit quick, so I appreciate everybody's time, and thank you very much.